Hello everybody, and welcome to what is officially episode 51 of the Wildlife Photography Q&A. Now, if you joined us last week, Gerry and myself did a bit of a relaunch on the old series that he hosted for quite a few years. And for this episode, I've brought Mike along. Mike, how's it going?
I'm well, thanks yourself, Johan. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really excited and look forward to answering some of the cool questions that came through.
Good, man. Welcome on your debut appearance.
There we go.
So, as always, thank you so much for the questions that you guys have sent through to us. Mike and I are going to be answering them as best as we possibly can and to help you guys and try to add value to you. So, without wasting too much time, let's get straight into it.
Lucas Walter Photography asks, how and in what type of wildlife photography you want to expand or challenge yourself?
Lucas, thank you so much for that question. It's quite an interesting one. And I think during this time when we haven't been able to travel for quite a few months, it has given us some time to give it a bit more thought. For me personally, I think one of the first things that jumps to mind is Madagascar. Trying to get more sort of macro type photography on things that we don't often see. Things like chameleons. I think that is something that I maybe want to focus on a bit more, and even some of the smaller insects that we almost drive past on a daily basis. I think from a wildlife point of view, I think that is what I would like to focus on personally. Mike, I don't know from your side, if there's anything that you'd like to focus on.
Yeah, definitely. I think looking at the smaller things is important. And Lucas, that was a great question. But I think something we all find ourselves full victim to is long lens envy. And we tend to sit on these massive focal lengths for majority of our experience in the safari. So I think in focusing my time looking at animals in the environment and getting shots where we can actually display where this animal is and the environment it finds itself in is also quite important, just to add variety to one's portfolio so that you don't just get these close-up portraits of lion or leopard or elephant or whatever it may be. So I think, focusing on the wider scenes is also quite important.
100%. And I think this relates is from a photographic point of view to even look at more videos, creating more videos in the field. And I think that's something that we've discussed. It's almost sort of where the attention is in social media these days, and it kind of tells a bit more of a story. So I think definitely from my point of view is to create more videos and to also, I think I mentioned this in the last episode as well, but to showcase things that we don't see all the time. Show people the airports that we travel through, the behind the scenes, the camp staff, the chefs prepping the meals, those kind of things from a content point of view. That's definitely what I'd like to focus on.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm sure you'll find a few animals and wildlife in airports around the world. So
100%.
It'll be a good challenge to take on.
100%. Thank you so much, Lucas. Great question.
Marius from South Photography asks, hey Johan, a question for the Q&A podcast. I'm a South African staying in Denmark, and I used to work as a guide in South Africa. I'm now looking to get into private guiding Danes to Africa after learning Danish. How can I make Danish operators understand that my experience as a guide is important and the value I can add is way more than a Danish guide traveling to Africa, even though my language skills might not be on the same level as a Danish guide or translator? Thanks for the awesome content, keeping me positive and believing that I can live out my dreams.
Marius, thank you so much for your question, man. Really appreciate it. I think it's a very interesting one that you've raised, and I think it's a challenge that a lot of people face getting into the private guiding industry after guiding at lodges. My answer to you would be: what do you offer those operators? What do you bring to the table to them? Because I think there's too many private guides that get to operate or get to a company and they just want to go on safari. They just want to travel. They just want to be out in the bush, and it's not as simple as that. You need to sort of stick out from the crowd. I don't know if you've got a clientele basis that you can offer these operators or the agents, and maybe just I don't know if you've done a presentation for them, but I think one thing that you definitely have on your side that you mentioned is that you've got that African safari experience, and that is irreplaceable. But you've got to bring something more to the table than just having that guiding experience, because there's a lot of other guides that might have that same experience. So you've got to sort of look at how you're going to stand out from the crowd, especially during this time. Every single person is starting their own business from a private guiding point of view, from a photographic company point of view. So there's a lot of noise out there almost that you've got to stand out from. Maybe another idea might be to offer taking a video of the clients on safari and then giving that to them as something extra. But that would be my advice to you is, first of all, what can you bring to the table for the operators from a clientele basis? And then the second thing is, how are you going to stand out from the crowd? Just bear in mind, there's a few hundred or few thousand private guides out there looking to do the same thing. So that'll be my advice to you. And as always, let me know if we can help. Always happy to help you. Mike, I don't know what you think?
Yeah, Johan, I think you've summed it up pretty well. You've touched on all the vital and important bits of how you can benefit from this. But when you had mentioned create videos of your guests out in the field, it kind of presents something to these Danish operators. You need to have some form of portfolio to show off, because it doesn't help you walk into a place, this is what I do, this is where I've been, but you've got nothing to show for it. And it's like, if you look at myself, Johan, and everyone in the Wild Eye office, we're very active on Instagram. And it's not to chase those 50, 60,000 followers. We do what we do in order to show you and everyone who wants to travel with us what we do, where we've been, and the experiences that we create for our guests. And again, as Johan had mentioned, those experiences that you've had on the ground in Africa and in the field, no book can buy that experience and that knowledge. So if you can build a database like that, maybe on Instagram or a personal website, I think that's also a good step moving forward.
Yeah. And Maurice, also just to touch on one more thing, I think the best advice I got about 5 years ago when I started Wild Eye is, don't compare your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 50. Right? I think from what I've seen on Instagram, you're still quite young. You still got time to even start your own company. If you're not getting the trust or the help from the operators that you're looking for, start your own thing. But give yourself 4 or 5 years to sort of really grow into that role. You're not going to get busy right from the word go. And I mean, I've experienced that firsthand. Mike's experienced that firsthand. Even within a bigger company with great support and amazing people to work with. Only now, sort of after 4 or 5 years, are you really starting to get that following and really starting to get busy. So that would be, again, another piece of advice. Don't rush into it. Take your time, box clever, and yeah, good luck.
Abikram Shekawat Photography asks, which RAW file is better, uncompressed or compressed, and what is the difference between them?
A great question, and the short answer is, what are you shooting for? Are you shooting for big billboard prints? Are you shooting for competitions? Are you shooting to make a photo book, or just show your friends and family what you had got up to on your adventure in the wilds of Africa? So, in my opinion, and obviously with the work or line of work I'm in, I would obviously want to maximize the most amount of information as I possibly can when I fire that shutter. So I won't compress my RAW files, because the difference between the two is a compressed file, you render a few bits of information and you will never be able to get them back once that's embedded onto the memory card. And an uncompressed file is your largest file size possible, and you'll have every single little piece of information to work with. Now, obviously, this will take up a lot more space on your hard drives or your memory cards or whatever it may be, but in the long run, and seeing that this line of work that I'm in, the most amount of information possible is vital. Johan, I don't know if you have anything to add on to what I just mentioned, but it's a pretty straightforward question.
Yeah, 100%. Couldn't agree more. Shoot, like if you're shooting wildlife and you're looking to do prints and things, shoot in RAW. You can always export those files a little bit smaller. Whereas if you shoot a small file, there's not much you can do about it. And from a processing point of view, you do lose a lot of detail. So yeah, high res RAW all the way.
Perfect.
Tiny Trunk Photography asks, recommended lenses for South Luangwa.
Mandeep and Druti, thank you so much. Great question, and it's one that we get quite a lot before going to South Luangwa. For me personally, I've got 2 lenses that I'll always carry to South Luangwa. One will be a 400mm 2.8, and then I'll carry a 70 to 200 millimeter lens with me. And the simple reason for having the 2.8 lenses is for the low light photography, especially sort of being able to do night drives. And the 400mm reach is for the majority of the time to get up close-up portraits of leopards. I've got the the wider angle lens to then photograph those beautiful scenes along the Luangwa River. And then also from a birding point of view, if you're going to South Luangwa, one of the focuses should be on the carmine bee-eaters. And then I found like a 400mm lens works really, really well. You can get away with a 300mm as well, but for me, from personal experience, I love that 400mm 2.8, and then always the 70 to 200 as a backup. Mike, I don't know your experience there?
Yeah, definitely. And it sounds like you and I have had the same camera bag on our trips to South Luangwa. But this is a great question, and it's important to do this homework before you venture off to a new destination. But as I've mentioned, I carry almost the exact same gear as Johan carried into South Luangwa, so I wouldn't really add or take away anything from that kit. If you are a keen birder and you do want to photograph more birds during your time in South Luangwa, I would recommend maybe just also packing in a converter or two, a 1.4 or 2 times converter, because at times that 400mm can be slightly short for birding. So if you then pop on a 1.4 or a 2 times converter, you just have that little bit more reach to capture the shots of the birds flying around. That would be my only add-on recommendation there.
Yeah. I think also the question is have a look at your portfolio and what images do you want to create on the trip. If you've been to the Sabi Sands and you've got 1,000 close-up portraits of leopard, then why create those same images over and over again? So then you might opt for maybe 100 to 400 and a 70 to 200. I think very much sort of the images that you want to create also depends a lot on the gear that you'll take with. And it is a very diverse destination. If you're going to a place like Kahingo with the different hides that they have to offer, there's a million different images that you can create. So I think before you go on that trip, whichever operator you're going with or lodge, send them a few images on like what you want to create, and then go on the recommendations from there.
Aiden Facer Photography asks, would you say gimbals are useful in wildlife photography, or is handheld preferable?
All right, Aiden, so very important question, because this might result in you either breaking your back or not breaking your back when you're traveling through big international airports. In my personal opinion, for still photography, a gimbal, I don't see the use in it. If you getting into the field of wildlife photography, you need to be prepared to hold up these heavy lenses and carry them around and stabilize them yourself in a way. But if you are going to be focusing on video quite a lot and cinematography type genres and styles, then yes, maybe a gimbal will be quite beneficial. But for still photography and only capturing these still moments out in the field, I would say handheld is the way to go, because not only does that gimbal now take up space in your camera bag and make it heavier, but it also takes up space in the vehicle. And if your camera is secured to this gimbal at all times and suddenly the leopard's not on the right of the vehicle anymore, it jumps to the left and there's a massive fight with the leopard on a hyena, and you sitting there struggling to get this camera off the gimbal, you're going to be pretty cheesed, because I know I would. So in my personal opinion, for mobility and just the ease factor, I shoot without a gimbal out in the field. Johan, I'm not sure if you have had any experience using gimbals in the field, but what would you say?
I think from a game drive point of view, I agree with you. The fact that you said, because the animals move, right? That's what they do. So a beanbag I find is a much better use. And you can travel with an empty beanbag and just fill it up with rice at the lodge. So you don't carry this heavy thing in your camera bag. The only time where I've used gimbals with great success was in Chobe on the boats, where you don't really have something like a beanbag to rest on. And then if you're holding like a 600mm lens, it can get quite heavy. So then gimbals work well. But otherwise, a beanbag I found personally a way better option.
Adil Matwadia asks, do you get photographer's block?
What an interesting question, seeing that we've kind of found ourselves in a situation where we couldn't get out into the field, into the areas that we really want to get to over the past couple of months. And this question couldn't be kind of more appropriate for the time. Because sitting at home, sitting in Johannesburg, there's not really much to do or to photograph. Well, in saying that, there is a lot to do and to photograph. You just need to kind of get out of that comfort zone, step outside of that box, and explore. And it is a fearful thing because obviously you don't have much knowledge when it comes to the genre, and but once you do start exploring these different avenues and different genres, a different side of your creativity and your creative mind kind of kicks in, and it's truly rewarding. I've spent a lot of time doing shoots at home, shoots in the CBD, where I've never ever explored because I was just quite nervous of the place, walking around with expensive gear. But it was an incredible experience. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I can see this experience help me fight off these photographers' blocks once I do get back out into the field. Johan, I'm not sure if you've faced any challenges.
100%. I think every single photographer out there faces it at some stage or another, and I don't think there's actually a recipe to get through it. I mean, like Mike said, I think the only way to get through it is to carry on photographing, and eventually maybe your creative mind will sort of start speaking to you again. I've definitely over the last sort of couple of years had a bit of a sort of a photographer's or mental block, whatever you want to call it, and it's just sort of trying to not create the same thing over and over again. I think that's one of the things, having a bit of a break from wildlife photography. I haven't picked up a camera for probably 4 months, and now I'm eager to get out there again. I've got ideas and what I want to create, and maybe that's another way of maybe tackling the whole thing, is to just step away from your camera a little bit, enjoy the experience, and eventually that creativity will get back in again. But 100%, I think all photographers go through that.
Yeah, I think if you don't, you're doing something wrong. So thanks for that question, Adil. Really appreciate it.
MJO Wildlife asks, would you say a 70-200 2.8 is a great lens for wildlife? Does this apply to full frame and crop sensors?
I would say the 70-200 is the best lens for wildlife photography. And it's a lens that I pack into my camera bag on every single safari I go to, regardless of the destination, the duration of time I'll be spending there. That lens is always there. Not only is it a great range to help you apply and show off your animal in its surrounding areas, but that the aperture of 2.8 as well is just phenomenal in low light. So, and this, yes, goes for both full frame and a crop sensor. And the cool thing is, if you are shooting with a crop sensor body, you will have a little bit more reach than those who are shooting on a full frame. Because if you look at a Canon crop sensor, it's about a 1.6 crop. So you'll be sitting at about, I think it's 112 millimeters at 70 millimeters. And then if you zoom out to 200, you'll be sitting at about, I think it's 340. So there's a slight benefit there because you have a little bit more reach. But a perfect lens, and I'm sure Johan, you can agree with me on this, and everyone in the Wilder office would probably agree that that lens is always, it has to be in your camera bag.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like we mentioned on the South Luangwa question, it's always in the bag. Like Mark said, purely from a versatility point of view, it's nice and light. It works in every destination. Great lens. And if you're looking at buying one, highly recommend it.
Yeah, they are pricey, and obviously the 2.8 is a little bit more pricey than the f4 would be. But trust me, that move into the f2.8 is worth that little bit extra. So yeah, go for it, and I can guarantee you won't regret that.
All right, guys, thank you so much for sending your questions. That's a wrap. Mike, thank you so much. If you have more questions for us, feel free to email us. Our emails are down at the bottom here. Next week, Gerry will be hosting the episode, so you can also email him or send him a message on Instagram. We look forward to answering your questions, and as always, thank you so much for watching and for all of your support. Till next time, cheers.
Cheers, bye-bye.